MBA decision release time can be a time of triumph or heartache. My heart goes out to all the candidates who did not receive the news they hoped for this admission cycle. You need to understand that a ding, the industry jargon for getting the dreaded rejection letter, is not a verdict on your worth. The MBA admissions process is influenced by complex factors outside of your candidacy: the overall applicant pool, the timing of your application, and sometimes luck. If you got denied, this doesn't have to be the end of the road. I have worked with so many MBA candidates who have turned things around remarkably and gotten into their dream MBA programs when they reapplied. You may be unsure how business schools view reapplicants and how to improve your MBA application the second time around. You should know that schools definitely welcome reapplicants and you don't get penalized for having been denied in the past. You can definitely get admitted if you reapply. In fact, showing grit and persistence and demonstrating renewed commitment to your goals, the goals that made you decide to apply to an MBA program in the first place, are qualities that, as a former dean of MBA admissions, I can tell you MBA adcoms value highly. However, simply resubmitting your old application and expecting a different result this time around is not a great strategy. So how do you reapply and substantially increase the likelihood that this time you will get admitted? One big mistake MBA candidates make is to think that there's one single thing that went wrong with their application. If you're expecting that there's one clean reason, one place where you faltered, one thing you did or didn't do, and that it can be precisely pinpointed and perfectly fixed, I have news for you. That's not how MBA admissions works. So let's examine the tools you have at your disposal that can help you analyze why you weren't successful and how not to let that happen again. The critically important first step for you as a reapplicant is to recognize that there are two distinct scenarios at play for the MBA candidates who get rejected. The first possible scenario is that you are not sufficiently qualified for MBA admission. The second is that you are not sufficiently competitive. Now, these two categories may seem similar, but you should not make the mistake of thinking of them as one and the same. If you take the time to understand how they're different, you will be in a much stronger position to create a reapplication strategy that results in success. Let's look at each of these scenarios and understand the driving forces that might lead to them. Being deemed insufficiently qualified means that you are seriously lacking in something. That something typically relates to your academic ability, the quality or quantity of your work experience, or your communication and interpersonal skills. An example of this might be someone whose test scores and GPA were on the very low end or outside of the range of successful admits. Well, the test scores and GPA are not the leading determining factor of an MBA admissions decision. A set of statistics that leave room for doubt about your academic ability may very well be the end of the road for some candidates. The same can be said about work experience. If your years of work experience and the substance of your work experience, which includes your responsibilities, accomplishments, and contributions, are much weaker than the rest of the pool, your odds will plummet. For international MBA candidates, especially those applying to US schools, English language skills play an outsized role in the MBA admissions process. So whether you're an US candidate or an international one, if your language or overall communication skills presented in a subpar manner across the various parts of the MBA application, the process can often end at the initial review. If your MBA candidacy came short in one of these categories, you failed the evaluation part of the MBA admissions process, the part that determines who is admissible. In the second scenario, you may very well have passed the evaluation stage. You may have been deemed admissible, but you failed to pass the selection stage of the MBA admissions process, the stage that determines who, among a large pool of qualified candidates, will be invited to join the MBA program. Very frequently, this can happen because the candidate failed to stand out, but it could also be the result of someone else or a number of other candidates presenting a candidacy that the school wants more. How do you know which scenario happened to you? Unless you have extraordinary clairvoyance skills, it's not easy to know where exactly in the process you came short. If you were never invited to an interview, not even to the schools that tend to interview a large percentage of the candidate pool, such as Northwestern Kellogg, Then you should take a very close look at the class profile, both the medians and the ranges, to see if you really present a set of qualifications that are of the caliber your target program is looking for. If the answer is yes, you do have similar qualifications, then it's time to examine if you presented your candidacy well in the parts that paint a picture of you. Your resume, the various fields of the MBA application, your choice of recommenders, and especially your essays. If you were invited for an interview, there is a very high likelihood that you successfully passed the evaluation process. Chances are you were deemed admissible. Later in this video, I will talk about how to determine if it was your interview that stumbled you or not. Now, here's one thing I want you to pay special attention to. Being denied doesn't mean that you came significantly short in whatever areas you didn't present strongly enough. You may have come extremely close to being admitted. It's just that someone else, sometimes only slightly more competitive than you, or presenting a unique and highly sought after set of characteristics, was selected. With this being said, there are several obvious mistakes that candidates make that frequently result in rejection in the MBA admissions process. So let me cover the most frequent ones here. Number one, you try to sweep a weakness under the carpet. Whether it's your weak GPA or even just a tiny sprinkling of failing grades on your transcript, or hoping that the MBA AdCom won't notice or question them, is a big mistake. The same goes for gaps on your resume or even a non-traditional choice of recommenders. So if you had some of these and you didn't address them in the optional essay, that might have cost you the offer of admission. Number two, your career goals were overly aspirational and not backed up by transferable skills coupled with strong awareness of what it takes to pursue your desired career. Weak, unsubstantiated career goals send the school a signal that you haven't done your research and that you're not ready to be a strong MBA student. Number three, your communication and interpersonal skills, or perhaps your overall presence in your MBA application or your MBA interview were lackluster. Now, this is where it gets a bit complicated. If you made it to the interview round, but you ultimately didn't get admitted, this does not mean that your interview was the problem. Why do I say this? Because it's entirely possible that something else happened. You may have been entirely admissible. Your interview could have gone reasonably well, and you, in the final selection, ended up being less competitive overall compared to other candidates in the pool. Now, if at this point you're starting to think, this is complicated, how do I make sense of all of this as it relates to my application and next steps? I hear you. So let's talk about the specific steps you should be taking as a reapplicant. First, you must begin with a deep assessment of your candidacy, all parts of it. One obvious place to start is your statistics, GPA, GMAT or GRE, your work experience, or results of language exams if applicable. Next, examine your career goals and how clearly you laid out why they are a feasible next step for you, what transferable skills you have to make them happen, and how you will leverage the specific school resources as an MBA student. A very important but often underestimated part is fit. Even when the fit between your statistics and the school's class profile is there is no guarantee that you're able to demonstrate that fit at a more complex level in terms of community and culture. So you need to spend a good amount of time honestly and unsparingly diving into your old application. That's the only way to have a shot at turning things around in the new admission cycle. You need to know what to improve. Next, you need to decide what schools you want to reapply to. If there's one upside to getting denied, it's that you have learned a lot about the MBA admissions process. You should have a better idea if the schools you applied to were the right ones. You should consider how to adjust your list of target schools to improve your MBA admissions odds. Finally, equipped with the learning from your assessment and your updated list of target schools, it's time to roll up your sleeves and do the work. You will have two main goals as a reapplicant. Your goal number one is to improve your candidacy in all the ways that are possible. You can improve your GMAT or GRE, strengthen your letters of recommendation, the articulation of your career goals, and your essays. Equally importantly, And that's your goal number 2. You will need to decide how you will answer the question schools ask of reapplicants. That question is how your candidacy has changed since the last time you applied. I know all of this is a lot of work and often challenging work. It's not easy to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and muster the courage and motivation to walk the MBA application path again. But I want to reassure you, schools welcome reapplicants and you can get admitted when your application is stronger the second time around. You can transform your setback into fuel for your why, the fire within that is driving your desire to get your MBA. Reconnecting with your deeper goals will help you reignite your passion to succeed. If you think that at this point, you might benefit from some external input, I do ding analysis a lot this time of year. You can get in touch with me if you have exhausted the limits of how well you can do your own assessment, and if you know that you can benefit from the opinion of an MBA admissions expert.